If you would have asked me 5 years ago what the on-trend brewing thing would be in 2021, I never would have guessed that hard seltzer water would be so popular. Laugh all you want, but hard seltzer is a fantastic day drinker and likely isn't going anywhere in the near future. Imperial Yeast's new seasonal strain, W04 Paramount, can help brewers get the most out of their seltzer fermentations. A clean and aggressive fermenter, Paramount will produce an excellent seltzer with low fusel alcohols, and it's produced in a gluten-free medium. If you've tried making seltzer with standard ale or lager strains, you know the struggle, and Imperial Yeast is here to help with W04 Paramount. Check it out at imperialyeast.com. Welcome to the Brew Lab. Belgium is one of the great beer countries. Whether you prefer their unique yeast character or their exotic mixed fermentations or just the drinkability of well-crafted beers, there's something for everyone. I'm your host, Kay Job, and today in the lab I'm speaking with Breandán Kearney, author of the new book, Hidden Beers of Belgium. This week we'll take a slight detour from some of our usual scientific fare and look at a group of beers that are as much steeped in science as they are history and tradition. Now, each of the beers profiled in Breandán's book are hidden. So we're not profiling Cantillon or Bungoose or St. Bernardus or Duvel or Le Chouffe or Orval or any of the other Belgian beers that you can probably name off the top of your head. These beers are unique and they are local, and you'll have to actually go there to Belgium to get them, which is great because this is a book that profiles the beers, the breweries, and the people behind them. It's also the history of the region, the tradition. It's like being transported into a little hamlet in Belgium where all the locals go to drink, and it's also a fantastic tour guide for a beer trip to Belgium. Now, look, this book is awesome. It's got so much information about a bunch of different types of Belgian beer styles, beers that you wouldn't find anywhere else in the world, and it's also incredibly uniquely, locally Belgium. Again, it's a great tour guide, so if you're thinking about taking a trip to Belgium, you're going to want to take this book with you. And look, the book is awesome, and instead of me just sitting here gabbing about it, let's get to the interview with Breandán. But first, if you have yet to sign up to become a patron, please consider doing so. By becoming a patron of Brewlosophy, you get awesome rewards like access to Brewlosophy contributor recipes that we've never published, new discounts each month to YakimaValleyHops.com, and for $3 a month, access to a live monthly Q&A session with a special guest from the brewing industry. Now, like I've said before on the show, becoming a patron is super easy. All you have to do is go to patreon.com/Brewlosophy, check out the different rewards levels, sign up, and then you get access to whatever reward you would like to receive. At that $3 level, you get access to the private Patreon Facebook page where all of the previous Q&A sessions are available to watch. Guests like Vinny Chilurzo, John Palmer, Marshall Schott. There are so many more. All the information you need to get access to this awesome resource is available at patreon.com/Brewlosophy. Thank you to everyone that's left a rating or review of the show. If you haven't yet left a rating or review on your podcast service of choice, I'd really appreciate it. It really helps others like you find the show, and it lets us know what you think. It lets us know where we can improve. The Applying the Science series with Jordan is a direct result of ratings and reviews on the podcast service. So please, if you haven't yet, take some time, go and rate us on Apple Podcasts or wherever it is that you listen to podcasts. All right, feedback this week is from listener Paul, who says, "Hey, Kate, I just wanted to drop you a line to say how much I enjoy the show. The topics are often over my head, but learning by osmosis is something, right? The follow-ups with Jordan, where you break it down to small fries like me, not only improves my brewing game, but they're enjoyable to listen to as well. Really, everything Brewlosophy does is fantastic. Anyway, I hope this doesn't come across as fanboyish, but keep up the good work and tell Jordan he's not using enough hops." Well, Paul, thank you for sending in that feedback. It's awesome whenever we get positive feedback like this. Of course, we appreciate all feedback, but it is really great to hear that you're enjoying the show, even if sometimes the concepts are over your head. And yes, learning by osmosis is correct. If you want to put me next to you while you go to sleep at night, I hear that you can learn things while you're sleeping. So yeah, learn by osmosis or learn by me talking to you in your ear as you go to sleep. That's kind of creepy, but we're just going to leave that there. All right. Well, I'll be back after this break talking with Breandán Kearney about hidden beers of Belgium. One of the biggest improvements to my brewing practices was the upgrade to stainless steel, and Delta Brewing Systems offers some of the lowest prices on high-quality stainless gear, like the Firm Tank, which holds 8 gallons or 30 liters of wort, comes with a domed lid to reduce the chances of a messy blow-off, and it can hold up to 4 psi of pressure. Delta Brewing Systems also has their own line of brew kettles, as well as one of the lowest-priced all-in-one electric brew systems out there, and their prices are remarkably affordable. If you're in the market for legit stainless gear that won't break the bank, you've got to check out deltabrewingsystems.com. We all know that designing recipes is really fun, and doing it well is so much easier with good software. We at Brewlosophy recently made the switch to Brewfather, and honestly, y'all, we could not be happier. Brewfather utilizes the latest technology to bring you the most robust cloud-based recipe design software that can be accessed anywhere, on your phone, tablet, desktop, and even offline. It also works seamlessly with numerous third-party devices to make it easier to monitor every step of your brew. I know change can be difficult, but trust me when I say you need to go to brewfather.app today to try it out for yourself. That's brewfather.app.
Early holiday deals are here, and so are amazing deals at Amazon. You'll save so much on early holiday gifts for the kitchen, like appliances and cookware. You'll have money left over for an ice cream scoop that's perfect for serving up dessert, or a perfectly shaped snowball. Think fast! Gotcha! Or that cutlery set, so you can carve up the turkey with surgical precision. Oh, what fun it is to save. Shop early holiday deals now.
Got great ideas, but no idea how to build a website? Get Bluehost. Their AI design tool creates high-quality WordPress sites super fast. Whether you're a blogger, influencer, or launching a side hustle, Bluehost helps boost your growth with built-in marketing and e-commerce tools. Upgrade to cloud and get 100% uptime and 24/7 security to stay online all the time. Why wait? You've got the vision. Make it real. Visit Bluehost.com to get started.
Belgium is a country that is almost synonymous with the terms beer and chocolate, and you can find excellent examples of each in Belgium and internationally, and in fact, I could name more than a few internationally celebrated Belgian beer brands. But there are lots of great beers in the country, and in the lab with me today, I've got Breandán Kearney to talk about his new book, Hidden Beers of Belgium. Breandán, welcome to the Brew Lab.
Thanks so much for having me. It's a real pleasure to be here.
I'm excited. I was actually in Belgium in May of this year as we extended a trip to the European Brewing Conference, which was actually held in Lille, France. But anyway, on both ends of that, the Oregon State University and University of Arkansas brewing science programs got to explore so many amazing beer establishments. And I was totally blown away by the diversity and quality of Belgian beers. And it turns out that you've kind of written a book on this topic. Is that diversity something that Belgians also celebrate and love?
Well, first of all, that conference is actually quite a big one, and it took place not too far from where I'm based on the kind of French Walloon border on kind of West Flanders. So I'm sure that was fun. In terms of like Belgians also celebrating that kind of diversity, which everyone knows about, I think Belgians are very aware of like how good their beer is. It's probably one of the reasons why there's not that much like foreign beer. There's not that much imported beer into Belgium. It's really, really difficult as a producer to get your beer sold in Belgium. Like I know from going to other countries, you know, there's a lot of imported beer in every country, you know, where there's like maybe specializations that the sort of the domestic countries don't produce. But yeah, so like it's like, why would I drink another beer that's not Belgium? So I think they're kind of aware of how good their beer is. And the fact that it's at a really affordable price point, like so you can get extremely world-class beer at a very sort of democratic prices is like something that they're not willing to pay more for, like a Dutch beer or an American beer or whatever. So, but I think also they're probably take it for granted a little bit. And maybe also they tend to stay in their own lanes as well. So for example, if you're used to drinking the local, you know, and sometimes it's not like a pincha, so it's not necessarily like a pilsner. It could be what I would call like a European lager, say, that's of the regional brewery in your area that owns most of the property cafes. Like that's your pincha. Then, you know, that's kind of maybe what you'll stick to if you're used to drinking your Old Brown if you're used to drinking your Saison, or maybe you live in the Belgian and you're used to getting, a Huza because your dad drank Huza as well. You might steady your own lane and not try, some other more experimental hop forward beers, or beers from that are more common in other parts. Like they say in Belgium as well, like that people, south of Liège in Wallonia are much more likely to drink sweeter, higher alcohol beers. So I think, yeah, they do tend to stay in their own lanes, but I think they are aware that there is this diversity and there is a very high quality across their beer culture.
Yeah, for sure. It's funny you mentioned that the international, imports. You're right. I didn't see very many. I mean, we always see like the Anheuser-Busch imports, right? I mean, in pretty much every country you go to. But all I saw was Jupiler, which of course is an Anheuser-Busch brand, but it's a Belgian brand, right?
Yeah, well, it was like this massive family brewery in Liège that was really famous, and actually, like today in Belgium, Jupiler is still I think the more like respected beer than Stella. Whereas I think internationally Stella has the kind of kudos.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, we can get Stella here easily in the United States, and I don't think Jupiler at least is as common. I mean, who knows? There's all those international treaties and everything that going along with that, and Anheuser-Busch being able to distribute all around. But you're right. I mean, you mentioned, right, that the people might drink at their local pinches and drink like a Saison or an Oud Brun or a Gueuze or any of these other beers. But even just the diversity of those, right? I mean, are incredibly different styles. Like I mentioned at the top of the show, people are willing and able to give international examples, especially of Abbey style beers, which is a different, triples, doubles, and blondes. But it turns out, and one of the things I learned in visiting Belgium is that there's an incredible variety of beers in Belgium that are, as you call in your new book, hidden beers. And so you actually have written a new book titled The Hidden Beers of Belgium. And of course, we'll put a link to the book in the show notes so listeners can check it out. And you're also host of the podcast Belgian Smack. I think I said that right. If not, you can correct me.
Perfect. Yeah.
Yeah. And then, so I wanted to ask you first, I always like to do a little bit of an introduction. So I'll ask sort of two questions. First, I'll ask, how did you become interested in writing about beer? And then second, I'll ask you, give us a general introduction of the hidden beers of Belgium.
Yeah. So first question, how did I become interested in writing about beer? How did I become interested in beer? I moved to Belgium is the very simple answer.
Yeah. I can tell by your accent, that you're not a native of Belgium.
Yeah, so I'm originally from Ireland. I, of course, drank beer. My wife always says that in Ireland we have a drinking culture rather than a beer culture, but in Belgium there's a beer culture. So, drinking Guinness with my dad, there's an incredible pub culture in Ireland. But when I moved to Belgium, 2013, it was like, you go into all these incredible brown cafes that have been there for so long with the enamel sort of signs on the tobacco stained walls. You have a beer menu handed to you, which is just like indecipherable when you first arrive. The beers are all like 9.5%, 10%, incredibly fermentation forward in their flavor profiles.
It's totally
Every
true.
one of them has their own like branded glassware. Mm-hmm. And then you just start to taste them and you're like, holy, what is this? Right. So then I kind of started researching, investigating, and I did a bunch of like educational courses, beer sommelier, beer appreciation, brewing courses, and then I started writing about beer, and then I started to, you do the Cicerone and the stuff, and I traveled a bit in BJCP, and then I started reporting, so actually going and talking to breweries about not only their beers but about their actual stories. Got picked up for with a bunch of magazines in the US and the UK, who both beer nations who are interested in Belgian beer. So kind of spiraled from there. Belgian Smack emerged, and I have this website and podcast. And I guess the book that's just come out, to segue to the second part of your question, is this culmination of like all that 10 years of travel and reporting and talking to people. And it's something that I worked really hard on with the publisher Lister based in Antwerp and the photographer Ashley Joanna to make it like both a valuable tool for people that are interested in beer, commercial and home brewers, but also to offer sort of these inspiring narratives about these like quirky, weird, but also incredibly resilient people in these weird places that produce these beers. So it's also beautiful photography, and it's I'm kind of exhausted, and I'm delighted that it's out there now, ready for people to enjoy.
Yeah. No, I mean, the book is absolutely incredible. I've read through it. I would highly, highly recommend it to anyone. And I often say, I think my ideal vacation, if I were to just pick and do a vacation just for myself, not worrying about the kids or, what they would enjoy or any of that stuff, I would like to just get off of a plane and then go to the local pub or go to the local bar and just start asking people, what should I do next? Right. And I've said that that's just one of the ways that I love to travel. I love to get the recommendations from the people that live in the country. And that's what you've done with this book, The Hidden Beers of Belgium. You've given a roadmap for people to go and enjoy beer in Belgium, but enjoy high quality beers. And, a wide variety and diversity of beers. I mean, there's 24 beers in the book, and of course, we won't be able to talk about all of them today. But that's what it's such an amazing representation of the brewers themselves. You tell their stories. You talk about the beer, what might pair with the food, where you can find it. There's map. There's all of this information, and I love it. And I think if I were to go back to Belgium, I would probably use this as my roadmap for traveling around the country. Or at least if I'm in the area, I'm going to hit some of these breweries because they sound incredibly amazing. Now, Belgium, of course, has a rich brewing tradition. As you said, when you walk into the pub, they hand you this beer menu, and it's almost indecipherable a little bit in terms of what you're doing. One other comment real quick, which was funny because you said it's 9 or 10%. I'll never forget, we went to a place that's in Ghent, and it's basically right on the river there in downtown Ghent. We're looking at the beer menu, and it says Belgian table beer, 8%. And I remember going, whoa, okay, we're in a different place.
Yeah, Belgian producers being kind of loose and fast with their style descriptions, which is, still very much the case.
Yeah. Well, and so it does have a rich brewing tradition. And of course, like I mentioned, most of the listeners of this podcast could probably name several internationally famous styles. But what did you hope to accomplish by writing this book about hidden beers in Belgium?
Well, I think, everyone that knows anything about beer is very aware of the kind of iconic brands in Belgian beer and how how important they are, I think, to the international scene. So, you've got you mentioned the Trappists, and that's not just like a style of beer, but that's kind of a whole ethos and sort of approach to brewing and selling beer. Mm-hmm. Then you've got I guess the biggest brewing company in the world, AB InBev, with their brands that sort of sprawl across the world, from the their kind of the Stella to the Hoegaarden wit beer and all the rest of it. And then you've got sort of larger family breweries that have kind of made a strong impact, like Duvel Moorkat Group with their beers like Duvel and Schuf and Liefmans, and they're all kind of really well known. But actually, one of the reasons that I think Belgium is the only country in the world whose beer culture is recognized by UNESCO as world heritage is because underneath all those famous brands, on the ground, the beer culture that touches all aspects of life and society in Belgium is actually very rich and diverse as well. And in terms of the types of producers, in terms of the types of beers they're producing, in terms of how people interact with beer and all that tradition, you sort of, as well as the kind of the dramatic tension with all the innovation and the international facing producers today and the modernity, all that is why Belgian beer is so great. Not alone the kind of the big brands that everyone always cites. So I kind of wanted to showcase that a little bit and show the ugliness and the beauty and the resilience and the humanity of all that sort of lesser known beer activity in the country.
Yeah.
For such a small, strange country that's just really hard to make sense of.
And it's incredible that you mentioned it is a small country, right? By scale, it's one of the smaller countries in Europe. It's not a large country by any means. I mean, you've got a very big neighbor. You got two very big neighbors, right? France and Germany are very large, and then the Netherlands, of course, is also a larger.
Another big neighbor is England, right across the water, just a couple of 100 kilometers. Yeah,
of course, right. England, right across the river. You've got all these big neighbors. neighbors. But the beer culture, like you said, it pervades everything that happens in Belgium. And, I think I was having a conversation with Dr. Scott LaFontaine a few weeks, or I guess probably months at this point back. And we were talking about how Germans have sort of self-limited themselves under the Reinheitsgebot, and that sort of has influenced American brewing as well, too. Craft brewing is still typically all malt, all malted barley and, some hops, water, and yeast with a very few additives, or at least as few additives as you can. But we don't see that same trend in Belgium. And I mean, I think as your book highlights, there are a wild diversity, and wild is sort of a pun and also intentional there too in those beers in Belgium. You can brew almost anything.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Germany and sort of maybe perhaps their self-limiting sort of behavior under the Reinheitsgebot, and I don't know about that, but I do know that like Belgium's location and history have definitely shaped how they brew. So on one hand, you have this incredible pragmatism, which is like, we just got to do what we have to do to make it work in the brew house and commercially.
Yeah.
And actually all those other rules and we mentioned as well about like the flippant disregard for styles or style nomenclature. It's just because pragmatically we got to just fit stuff. We got to fit square stuff in round holes, right? And that pragmatism is born from, can I curse on this podcast? I want to be respectful to your American listeners.
That's okay. But, you can.
Well, I'll soften it, but from being like pissed on by Spanish ruling classes, by Portuguese ruling classes, by German and Dutch and also French, so like everyone's passed through and everyone's, built their own architecture and brushed the Belgians to the side. And what the Belgians have done is like kind of infiltrate everything in every way so that they can make things work. And they're, that's why Belgian identity is such an incredibly difficult thing to pin down. And they're not like an outwardly patriotic country, but they have this, very unique characteristic. And that has totally filtered into how they brew. So it's like getting things done and things that you wouldn't necessarily consider in the first place to do. Why would you do that? Well, there's a reason for it. So that sort of pragmatism, but then that kind of location as well, to your east is Germany. So as you said, Reinheitsgebot, rules, high quality, engineering, kind of new. German beers were being imported into Belgium, right from beginning of the 20th century. So you got to compete with that. So you got to brew high quality beers. And a lot of the techniques that were used for like bottom fermentation or even just in how they constructed brew houses were like, the Belgians are smart. They like look and see what they're doing and they kind of adapt from that. Then to your sort of west and south, you've got the French who are using fruit like grapes. They're making wine. They're aging things in wooden barrels. Like you Belgians see that, like, and they're gonna take from that as well. So you have this mix, and then of course to the northwest you've got sort of Kent, southeast of England, major hop growing region, and it's no kind of coincidence that the northwest of Belgium, around the city of Poperinge, is like producing 80% of hops in Belgium, Belgian hops. And, they still today, they've always had a long relationship with hop growers in the southeast of England, but still to this day, they're still working in cooperatives. They're still, have contracts in terms of palletizing. There's still a lot of distribution relationships. So, I mean, it's not this weird beer culture that has evolved, what everyone calls Belgian, hasn't come from nowhere. It's a product of the weird history and location of this small country.
Yeah.
That's been jammed together by a lot of other countries.
Right. Jammed together, and it forced you to be adaptable, right? I mean, it's still kind of amazing to me too, that this country with, I guess, at least two official languages, right? You have Flemish.
Three official.
Three, right?
Three official.
Yeah.
And one which is like considered more and more popular every day, which is English.
Yeah.
But the three official are Dutch, which is Dutch, French, and German are the three official. But actually the Dutch is so dialecticized that on national Flemish television, they put up subtitles for people speaking in West Flanders so that the people in another part of Flanders can understand it. And this is something that I couldn't get my head around for years after I came here. It's like, why are they putting subtitles up in like Algemeen and Nederlands Standard Dutch so that because they're speaking the same language? And it's like, no, the people in Limburg won't understand the people, speaking in Ypres. And I'm like, oh, what? Yeah. So you have, and that's part of the regionality, which has preserved so much of the indigenous beer styles of Belgium. So, for example, you talk about Saison and Maloney, you talk about O'Brown and the Leestreek, and you talk about Witbier and Vlaams Brabant, and you talk about Lambic and the Pajottenland, and the fruit growing region in the Haspenau. Yes, that has been diluted by globalism, and of course things are very much different, but no other country has kept that intense sort of regionality in its beer, and still to this day that and there's there's reasons for that, and all these dialects are part of that whole puzzle, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally right. I mean, there's regional, there's dialect, and I think about it often too as beer is this social lubricant, right? So if you're walking across or down the street or across to another village, you've traveled to visit a place, and you bring your beer, right, as an offering and say, hey, here's what I'm we may not be able to speak together, but at least we can consume the same things. And that sharing of information, that adaptability is just so amazing. And I think maybe it has contributed a little bit to, some of those hidden nature, the preservation of the culture, preservation of the different beer styles. And so I wanted to start, diving into the book a little bit more. And I think we have to start by talking about what qualifies as a hidden beer, because I'm sure with all of the beer that's out there, and like I said, you've already mentioned, Duvel has a whole bunch of different brands. You've mentioned the Anheuser-Busch families, you've mentioned Le Chouffe and some of these others as well. There's so many different Belgian beers out there. I'm sure it was very difficult to determine what qualifies as a hidden beer in this book. So how did you go about that?
Well, I guess there were some hard and fast rules that we wanted, just so that we had a certain type of beer that we were kind of showcasing. So things like, obviously the beer had to be fully produced and packaged in Belgium. It had to be an actual brewery or a blendery, not like a contract relationship where you're getting it produced at another facility. Had to be independent. The beer had to be kind of regularly produced and readily available. The brewery had to be in business for 3 years or longer, because that sort of suggests some longevity potentially. And then there was other considerations around quality and the knowledge and skill and care of the producers. I think also story was a major part of how we thought about what would be included. And then that, to the man or woman on the street, it would be largely unknown. And a lot of these beers in the book are kind of confined to their regions, because they're maybe they don't have the marketing new, or everything is being invested in production. But on top of those kind of hard and fast rules, I obviously had like some sort of curation dilemmas. And one big thing for me was like, I did want to have some geographical representation, because it would be very easy to do, 24 beers in Vlaams Brabant or 24 beers in West Flanders. So you wanted to make sure that those regions, which perhaps have a less densely populated sort of circuit of breweries, can also be a little bit represented. Style diversity. No one wants 24 IPAs. We wanted to get everything to, talk about wit beer, talk about Hughes, talk about, sort of new hop forward beers. And then, it's like thinking about how each story is different, so making sure that there's a love story, and there's a story about resilience, and there's a story with a ticking clock and all that sort of stuff. So massive long list, then a shorter long list, then a shorter list, and then a short list, and then you get down to it. But even during the 2.5 years when we were like writing the book, there was still a lot of changes, because things happened to people that we wanted to include in the book. And we had to just stay on our toes. Yeah,
I can imagine, right? The key thing about, the sort of defining characteristic of a hidden beer is that it's currently hidden, right? And I think that's got to be a challenge for you too. But, the one of the things in reading through the book, the thing that really struck me is the stories, right? I mean, don't get me wrong, the beers are amazingly described as well, but it was written as if a story. Like, you feel like you're there with the brewer or the owner of the establishment or the person that you're sort of profiling. It's almost like profiling people, through the beers that they made, or how, and vice versa, profiling the beers through the people that made them. And it's such incredible storytelling. And like I said, I think it's one of those things that you feel like you're present in Belgium. And if you were going to use this to go and seek out these beers, it'd be a perfect opportunity. Like, this would be a perfect trip, right? Just go through, take this book with you, go visit Belgium and visit these 24 breweries. And you'd have just an amazing experience. But that story I just found so amazing, and that takes a lot of work to get that story and to talk to these people.
It's like really down to like the quality of your reporting and the work that you put into it. So like, you have to just go places, talk to people. Sometimes people don't want to talk to you. Sometimes producers are maybe not as open to sharing details about their production methods, their ingredients, as you'd like. So you just have to be persistent. Sometimes they're not comfortable talking about things that have happened in their life that would communicate some sort of shared human experience to the reader. So you have to be respectful of that, but also see what's important and see like, what the book's there. I really wanted to write it scenically. So, very much in the style of American sort of magazine journalism, New Yorker, Atlantic, GQ, high quality reported narrative that's plot driven, that has both sort of an internal arc and an external plot driven arc. And that's, I think, why you can be pulled in, because, it's not me telling you what I think. It's basically being dropped into a scene of something dramatic that's happened, like, a death in a family, or a flood, the brewery has been flooded, or, some like major issue that this protagonist has to solve in their quest. And there's not so many people doing that in beer, because it's, with brewery profiles, it can be difficult to find that unique angle. But thankfully, because it's such a human book, there's so many stories in Belgium that I think are quite inspiring. And like, I really wanted to focus on that human part, but at the same time, knowing, having worked in production and talking to brewers a lot, I know like how important it is to like commit some of this to writing, this technical information. So that's why I have like a full fact sheet for each beer, which has, of course, all the specs like IBU, EBC, but all list of all the ingredients, as much as I could get out of the brewers, in terms of like the exact malt that they use, the type of yeast, like what they're doing with their water chemistry, if I could get it out of them. And, the hop varieties that they're using, when they're using those hop varieties, and trying to put that in the story. But at the same time, I can give you all that in the context of like why they changed how they made the beer, or made it in the way they did. But also, it's really also about like the fact that beer is so human, in terms of like, we're making decisions, we're the ones that are consuming it, we're the ones that are serving it. So, that was of real interest to me.
Yeah. And it's what makes the book readable and passable, right? It's not just a written down, here's how to make this beer. It's here's the people and here's why they made this beer, right? Here's this amazing beer. And here, if you want to try to recreate this, maybe you can piece together some things, but you're also going to have to employ some of that Belgian creativity. You're going to have to be adaptable to your own brewing system and understand and put yourself in the shoes of this particular person that, is potentially losing their family farm and has to make something out of it, right? I mean, there's all of these incredible stories of how this works. And so one other thing to mention too, this book is in English, right? It's written by you, an Irishman, in English. And so it's intended, I would say, for, international audiences. And of course, I'm sure anybody in Belgium that's willing to or that knows English and would love to read through it. But it's divided into, I'm going to call it categories of beer. I don't know that there's a term. It's not divided into styles. It's not divided into, a region necessarily, although there is regionality to it because similar traded beers are generally in the same region. But it's sort of just in these 6 different categories. And I love the names through it. So that's what we're going to do in the second half of the show. We'll come back. We're going to take a break. We're not going to be able to go through all 24 breweries. I wish we could, but that's what the book is for, and why you need to go and purchase the book so that you can read about all 24 of these breweries. We'll try to hit one brewery from each category, time permitting, but we're going to go on to a break right now, and then we'll be back talking about some of those hidden beers of Belgium.
Established in 1995, More Beer has been consistently serving the greater brewing community since the times IPA was expected to be bitter and clear, and there are reasons they've stuck around so long. In addition to their massive product selection and excellent customer service, More Beer has locations on both the west and the east coast of the United States, which translates into fast shipping times regardless of where you live. And when you spend more than $59, shipping is free. When you're in need of brewing ingredients and gear, there's no better option than morebeer.com, one of the most trusted shops on the planet.
Early holiday deals are here, and so are amazing deals at Amazon. You'll save so much on early holiday beauty gifts, like hair care, makeup, and skincare. You'll have money left over to get your sister that ring light for her makeup tutorials.
Hit that subscribe button.
Or waterproof mascara resilient enough for watching the holiday classics.
I love this part.
Oh, what fun it is to save. Shop early holiday deals now.
Even if you've never spent time in Belgium, you're probably aware of the incredible variety of Belgian beers. And given their quality, it's amazing that any of the beers we're talking about today are hidden or that they would stay that way for long. So, Breandán, in writing this book, you had mentioned earlier that, you had to be on your toes a little bit, that things changed. I'm sure that some of these beers, won't always be hidden and potentially might not even be around, in the future. So how did you address all of that in finding these breweries and beers?
Well, you're absolutely right. And I think that the economic concerns that a lot of breweries have in other countries, and I know in the States as well, in terms of like energy, and we have the Ukraine war here in Europe, and people are drinking differently post-COVID, and younger people are drinking less alcohol. So like breweries are finding it really tough, and like small producers especially. But I felt that when I was going around and talking to people, in terms of like whether I was concerned that writing about the beers would make them less hidden. I think the point of the book was to like celebrate them and have people discover them. So I don't know if I'm too concerned about that, and I obviously don't want people to have problems in their breweries, but so like I think these are people that I would like for other people to know about, essentially. I do think though that even if people are aware of them and try the beers and absolutely love them, it's still going to be difficult because there is a lot of there's a lot of kind of distribution logistics in Belgium that mean that it's difficult to get, unless you're in certain networks or whatever, to get beers out or even export. But so some of them will remain hidden. Some of them will maybe become more popular. I don't know if the book will have anything to do with that or not. And again, maybe some of them will also disappear just because of the exigencies of the market and how challenging it is for producers right now.
Yeah, it is challenging. I mean, we spent a lot of time talking with the head brewer at Brasserie de la Seine, which is a big brewery now, right? I mean, that used to be a small brewery, but that's a large brewery that has that. And there were times whenever he was saying that he thought it was all done, right? He was ready to turn the lights off and not come back.
Was that Yvon de Bos?
Yes. Yeah, Yvon. Mm-hmm. Yep. Exactly.
Yeah. So, I mean, like De La Seine are a perfect example of a brewery that I had a lot of internal conflict about leaving out of the book because I think I include them. There's a back section in the book of 60 beers that I think are recommended that people should also know about. And there's a little bit about their stories. And so De La Seine are mentioned in there. But, they're such an influential and highly respected brewery, and how they have sort of molded the attitudes of particularly younger brewers since like they started in 2009, 2010. But they're just, like you said, they've become so big and they are so well known and so highly respected. I just felt that it would be intellectually dishonest to the reader and to myself to include them as one of the profile beers in the book. And of course, I try to mention in the back section those other breweries that I do want to include, like Cantillon, like de Fontaine. Like there's a bunch of them in there that people should really know about. Some of them they will, some of them they won't. But to include them in the first 24, the deeper profiles, which get all the sort of the kind of the page space, is unfortunate,
Yeah, of course. I mean, there's also one that I visited, Lambiek Fabriek.
Lambiek Fabriek.
Yeah, this is another great one. Yeah, but of course, yeah, like you said, it is a challenge to put these beers in there. But you did put 24 beers in there, and so let's start working through some of those categories. And so the first category that you've got in here is what you call thirst crushers. And here's the flavor text that you have in the book. This is thirst quenching, crushable, low in alcohol, and high in drinkability. These are the hidden beers that are finished before they're started. I love it, right? Makes sense. Totally a thirst crusher. And actually, I got to visit one of these hidden beers while I was in Ghent, in Belgium. It was Doc Brewing Company, and I had the beer that you featured in there, which is the Pils 13, not the Delta, but I had a Pils 13, one of the variations there, not the Delta. But this was because we were over at the local university talking with the brewing science team there, and we said, hey, we're in Ghent, where should we go drink? And they said, Doc. And lo and behold, here it is in your book.
Yeah, and it's kind of like a bunch of reasons that they're included. One is that that's a kind of a brew pub with a really good production space in a kind of a newly developed part of the city. It's very popular with a whole range of different types of people from socioeconomic backgrounds. But like Ghent has kind of for a long time been starved of like true brewing activity. And this institution and these people that were involved, who all came from their own different brewing projects to make Doc, they really inspired like a whole kind of wave of new things that were happening in the city of Ghent, and that's quite exciting. The other thing was like Belgium is so well known for its like, banana apricot triples, and it's like, citrus, green apple lambics, but no one really ever talks about lager in Belgium. So I wanted at least one story that showed how intentional Belgians can be about lager. And the story is really about how, like every country, lager is the kind of the biggest beer, and like some version of like American light lager or European sort of light lager we have here. But actually, inspired from the, let's call it inverted commas, authentic Pilsner. That's a sort of a thing that maybe Belgians didn't know what a Pilsner could be. And Dimitri Massians from Doc was involved in hospitality for a long time, worked a lot with wine, worked a lot with very high quality food, and he couldn't find any high quality like Pilsners in Belgium to like go with like on his list. And he's like, the Pilsner is what the reputation of what your cafe or restaurant sits on, right? Because if so it's don't give a shitty option. And right. He couldn't find this, so the kind of evolution of the story of that beer, which is in the book, it's, and like in terms of the beer itself, it's a way for me to explain like how that they kind of had this combination of like a Czech style Pilsner with sort of mouthfeel and body and the decoction, and with the German style, a little bit more dryness. They had like, not too many of these lagers in Belgium have a lot of hop character. They are not so dry, and they don't have like a strong bitterness. And there was a lot of resistance, of course, at the start. But like Pils 13 is this like very drinkable, a Pilsner, a great bitterness, a real hop character. And I think they're using Hallertau for Saaz and Magnum in that beer. So it was just like a really cool place from Ghent with a cool backstory about what these people did and how they stayed true to themselves. Because in the story, there's a couple of points where they are tempted to, steal some historical brand from someone else, and they're tempted to like take all these shortcuts because making conditioned Pilsner, it's impossible to compete. Yeah, price wise, and also in terms of like getting distribution into places. Everyone has their own like lager, so like it's like a whole story about business and about the importance of like just a drinkable pinche. That's of a very high quality, and that's like considered in inverted commas authentic, because that's a word that can be thrown around quite a lot. So not a story I think that people might be expecting, maybe in terms of like all the other sexy acidic stuff, but
right.
Yeah, I guess really, and just a really great, just a great beer.
Right. I mean, people don't think about, I'm going to go to Belgium and get a Pilsner, right? I mean, you think about all the, like you said, the other sexy styles. So like, I'm going to go and get a Goes from Cantillon, or I'm going to go and get a Duvel, or I'm going to go to the, St. Bernardus and get an Abbey style. But that Pilsner was fantastic. And the other thing that was authentic about it, and I can say this, I have street cred because I'm from Texas. Okay. And I walked in to Duck Brewing Company and I got, oh my God, something smells amazing. And they have a whole bunch of smoked meats right there that they also make.
And
on
that's
site.
that's the son, Arthur Messiaen, of one of the brewery owner, and the guy who's brewing, Janos de Bats. He's had his own brewing project before, and he also worked at the Proof, which is like, and maybe some listeners of this podcast who are like brewing scientists will know the Proof Brewery because of the incredible sort of lab work that they do in terms of experiments with universities in Belgium.
Yeah, yeah.
So like he's not coming from no experience. And like you say, like they have this on one side, they have the smoked meats, but they also have a pizzeria on the other side.
Yeah,
There's a bakery there.
Yeah.
There's like it's in one of those old sort of triangular roofed Flemish warehouses in the dock area, which is now full of like great restaurants, great, that whole area is like totally retransformed. So
Yeah. It's a cool place, right? It's a cool concept. It's a great pincha, and yeah, I mean, I enjoyed it. I certainly enjoyed drinking their lagers with their smoked meats. I mean, that was a fantastic experience for me. So really appreciated seeing that.
Yeah, but the thing is, people also think like there's not like these thirst quenching or these like low ABV, very drinkable but characterful beers in Belgium. And like another beer in that section is a cream ale.
Yeah.
Because these people came from a suburb of Leuven, Kesselo, came back to open a tap room, and they spent a lot of time in America. And basically they were like, what, this is like so drinkable. And, this is a neighborhood taproom experience that we want to create. Then you have another beer, which is a table beer from Brussels, which is essentially like a mixed firm table beer. It's essentially a mini saison, right? And it's like 3.8%, like all citrus, really dry, wonderful character. And then the other one is like a gluten-free session IPA. So like I tried to like show that, okay, yeah, we're going to do the triples, and we're going to do the wheat beers, and we're going to do the Huses and all, but this is also part of like Belgian beer. It's not just all the indigenous stuff.
Yeah, right. Exactly. And I say this all the time. I can't drink 5 triples or 3 triples, so, it's hard because there's a lot of alcohol there. I mean, I can do it. I've done it before, but it's not something
you're not supposed to.
I'm not supposed to, right? Exactly. But I want to drink those lower ABV, the thirst crushers. And there is still an amazing diversity in that thirst crusher category. The next category, though, is the one that I think a lot of people would be familiar with the Belgium, right? And this is the one that you describe as the acid test beers. It says wild yeast and bacteria produce a complex array of flavors in many Belgian beers. And whether it's a tangy tartness, a fruity sourness, or a puckering bite, these are the hidden beers that will bring a zing to your life. So yeah, tell us about one of the beers that passed the acid test.
Yeah, so one of the beers in the book is a Huse from Hoedboerenerf, which is this new blendery. So I also wanted to make the point that, yeah, it's beers, so you don't need to be a brewer. You can be a blender, and there's a huge tradition of blending in Belgium, which is, very respected, actually. So this is a guy, Senne Elenbos, whose family actually used to have a brewery, a lambic brewery back, I think it ended in the 1960s, but it was beside where his family farm is today. And his whole family farm was in jeopardy because his parents were getting divorced, and he worked for a period at Driefontein, so he kind of had a really good education in the ethos of lambic production. He worked directly with Michael Blankart and with Armando Belder. And basically he, started his own thing, sort of with all these things up in the air to try and to blend his own. And like I've tasted a lot of new lambic producers in Belgium in the last sort of year or two. And Boerenerf are definitely the standout in terms of like the Malsa, sort of citrus forward, soft, and like they're very intentional about like wood character. They know every fruit farmer they work with by name. It's like that kind of, every decision, they're obsessed with every decision, and it really comes through in sort of the quality of their beer. So, I mean, that's one of the beers, the producers actually, I think, that won't stay quiet for too long. And I already see on like Tour de Fuse or people are starting to like, travel there quite a lot. And I don't know how prepared they are for it because it's quite a small farm. But like, he's a really interesting character, Senna. He's like, he collects stag beetles, and he's really interested in like the biology of like insects and like in particular stag beetles. And there is like this indigenous Belgian stag beetle that's in that region, and he like measures them and measures their mandibles, which are the tusks, of the beetle, and he sends the statistics and data into the Belgian government. And
It's amazing.
there's a whole thing in the story about like the kind of the parallels between this, almost extinct species of beetle which lives in wood and like what he's trying to do with his lambic product. But yeah, he's a really interesting one. I mean, we and again, the acid test is like definitely the most niche sort of the beers in Belgium, but it's like the one with the most like egos and the most interesting characters and the most sort of wild flavor, wild in the sense of like crazy flavor kind of things, and a lot of politics between people. And of course, it's not just lambic, but you have like you have Old Brown as well. So there's like a sort of a pretty intense imperial Old Brown in the book, Cuvée Freddy from Alvina. There's also a fruited Old Brown in a crazy brewery called Knude, who are pulling their brew water through a cemetery where the sort of brewing water comes through the dead bodies, and the minerality that from those bones is put into the beer. And it's not something they're ashamed. They use it in their marketing, and everyone in the village knows about it. So there's a whole swath of sort of really incredible stories in that acid section.
Mm-hmm. Oh, totally. Right. And I mean, one that I mentioned earlier that's in the back of the book that didn't make it into the main notes was that Lambic Fabrique. I mean, that was a blendery. Well, they actually are brewing now on site too, but
but again, one of the producers that's really good quality and lovely people as well. And yeah, they've been very noticed since their arrival, and they're working closely with other producers to kind of benefit from membership of Horal in terms of distribution and conversations about production quality. So yeah, they're definitely one to look out for. And again, they were obviously on the long list,
Yeah, they made it on the long list for sure, and even on the short long list. But the other thing you mentioned there too is that this tour de goes, that's a really cool feature that you can participate in this. I think it's once a year, and there's buses that go around, and it takes you to all these
once every 2 years.
2 years, there you go. Yeah.
And it's specifically for Horal members, but of course those that are not members of Horal don't have Tour de Fuse days, but they have open days, so that the thousands of Danish and Germans and English and Americans and Canadians that are traveling around the Peloton at that time can pop into them, even though they're not on the official Tour de Fuse buses. So yeah, it's a really special festival because it's like not only a very unique beer festival where you're actually traveling to the producers that are all close together in the same area, but it's also like a real cultural event. And like it's a Payots, Flemish, they're very proud of it. So
it's super cool. I would highly recommend too that looking at that as well. But yeah, it's interesting too because a lot of those gozeries, the blenderies, they're not open to the public, as you mentioned, right? And so sometimes the only times you can see them is on that tour.
But the beauty of it is like the contrast between like going to like a tiny, like you go to like Hanson's, which is like, if we wanted to be kind, it's like high on volatile acidity, right? So, if you have a scale in lambic of like Malsa to harde Huse, Malsa Huse being like soft, harde Huse being, let's say, more acidic. Hanson's are right over towards the harde Huse side. But like you go to there's a farm, there's like animals, you're drinking that Skaalbeekse Creek, which is like the most intense, like of all the lambic beers. And then you go, and it's like just a big like party there, and it's like all family, and they're like doing it part time, and there's huge history, and it's a cobblestone courtyard. And then you go to Bone, which is like one of the and they have like a 25-piece brass band that's just walking around everywhere, and they have like food trucks and everything. So it's like the breweries you go to, they're all so different in what they offer and how they see the Tour de Fuse and what they do. So it's just like, it's really special.
Yeah, and then of course in a different area, like a different regional, this is one of those distinctions about like sort of region. Like Goose is mainly in that local region there. I don't remember what's the name of the region that is.
It's the Pajottenland.
Pajottenland. There you go.
Yeah, so it's like southwest Brussels and Brussels. Yeah,
but like you mentioned earlier too, there's another region that's sort of famous for the hops. And so the next category that you had in the book is the Wolf Pack. And I admit that I was scratched my head like Wolf Pack. Okay, is that like a American jazz reference to the 1990s or 1930s, but here's the flavor
Wolfpack,
text. Yeah, right. But here's the flavor text. This is hops deliver bitterness, aroma, foam stability, and preservative qualities. The second part of their Latin name, Humulus lupulus, means small wolf. These are the hidden beers that express the howl of the hop. So I actually learned something new. It never occurred to me. I don't know why, but lupulus, of course, is a wolf.
Well, yeah, I mean, maybe it's more commonly known here in Belgium. There are brands like that are like there's about 4 or 5 brands named after a wolf, which are based on like that Latin term for the hop, and like there's also a beer Lupulus, which is the beer of one of the former partners that created Schuff with Chris Bauer. So like it's a well known thing. So maybe I was assuming too much there.
No, not at all. I think that's a good way to group them. It makes sense now because I've seen branding on beers that talk about like Humulus luteus and there's a wolf on the background. It's probably just me that didn't realize it.
But I guess like everyone thinks of Belgian beer, everyone thinks of fermentation forward flavor profiles, which is totally understandable, right? But actually Belgians are really good with hops, and I don't mean that in like extremity. I don't mean that in terms of like like aggressive dry hopping or IBUs. What I mean is like how they use hops to make the beer a better version of what it is or what it can be. So like I mean you go back to Orval 1937 dry hopping their beer,
Oh yeah.
You go, that you've got even like more recently, and I think it was like, let's say 2010, 2011, 12, Troubadour Magma, which was basically like a Belgian triple combined with like a triple IPA, and they were using like Simcoe for the first time in Belgium.
Yeah.
Like that's just an incredible beer. It's not in the book, like, but I'm just saying that, just because Belgians are maybe more conservative or the hop character of those beers is not like as pronounced as maybe American beers, that doesn't mean that Belgians aren't thinking deeply about like, how they're deploying their hops. So I kind of wanted to showcase a bunch of that. So like there is a very traditional Belgian blonde in there that is produced with hops from the guy who brewed it originally, and then that moved to another producer who owns another hop farm. That's K Koppenbier, which is also a history about the stubbornness of people in that Poperinga region.
Yeah,
I mean, there's
a fun
also
story
a beer,
to read, by the way.
Yeah, there's also a beer, from the other side of the country in the Liège Valley, which is a beer which a region which is like economically much poorer than other places, and which has suffered a lot, socially and economically. And that is produced by people who bought an old water therapeutic manor and converted it into a brewery home and tap room. And they actually went to Canada to study brewing and to New England, particularly to the Alchemist in Vermont, to kind of understand like water chemistry and hazy IPAs and to kind of talk about how, they were fermenting. And like they produced like some of the, the few but very good hazy IPAs, in the country. They also suffered a massive flood from the floods in 2021, which like wiped out a lot of towns around Liège. And their story is one of kind of community and resilience. And then you have like Valor Extra, which is like this kind of very also pragmatic brewer who was brewing Belgian blondes, but was tasked with coming up with a new beer and was one of the first to deploy Amarillo in his beer as a kind of a dry hopping addition. And then another farm brewery who was actually like a cancer researcher, scientist who started a brewery and sort of did this kind of a Belgian IPA thing. So, there is a lot. And even in, we mentioned like Yvan de Bas from De La Seine. I mean, if anyone's drank a De La Seine beer, like Zinnebeer is a Belgian ale. You don't think about the hops in it, but like it's not it's got a bitterness and it's got like hop character. Yvan loves using those like European noble hops and he loves his aroma addition. So that's all there. And I just wanted to sort of say to people, look, Belgians can also use hops.
Yeah, which I mean, you gave again like several amazing examples of it too, right? Like the flood story. I remember I was just like feeling heartbroken for those people, and then the resilience of the community to come together and help them, reestablish that. That's another one of those examples. We talked about the people, we talked about it, but that was one of those instances where you feel like you're there at the place, and then you start talking about the beer and thinking about the beer, and you go, oh man, I would love to have had to go and try that.
I was almost in tears when I was listening to them talk about that openly with me, and they're such open and giving people, and also get like very open about like the how they produce the beers. But the parallel was that they had spent some time at the Alchemist and in that sort of New England part of the world to explore, and the Alchemist himself suffered a massive flood. I don't know if you know about that, but they actually suffered, John Kimmich and his wife, and they basically had a brew pub, and they started there and it was completely flooded and they had to start again. So there's like all these parallels that I could draw on to like when they were starting their journey. The people that influenced them are actually also really fucking resilient. And, people, when people are coming to your brewery and taproom, which is water is coming in the floor, you've got all that expensive production equipment, you've got your home, you've got your young kids.
Yep.
And the people are saying, well, my home is already gone. It's destroyed. There are people already in the village who are dead. Can I put sandbags in front of yours to help save you? That's just like, that's a story of like, that brings us together, no matter if you're Belgian or American or Irish or whatever country you're from. It's like, these are the things that kind of can inspire us. And I really wanted to, that's kind of what I wanted to do with the book.
Yeah. I mean, and just a fantastic example. And like you mentioned, like, hops aren't something that we normally think of with Belgian beer, right? It's actually kind of a funny story. My colleague, Cécile Chenot, she's Belgian. She studied at the Université Catholique in Louvain-la-Neuve. And when she came over, we were talking about Belgian beers. And she was like, what do you, I have no idea what you mean. What is a Belgian beer? Like, these are just beers that are in there is no one Belgian style beer, right?
Well, that's it. That's what I would say. Like, if someone says to me, what's Belgian beer? I would say to them, it's beer that's made in Belgium. Because that's the only way to have any sort of unifying thread of it, It's kind of funny. It's kind of funny and useless at the same time in terms of an explanation.
It totally is. But, from an American's perspective, we look at it and I think at least often I don't think about hops, right? I don't think about thirst crushers. I think more often about like Abbey style beers and gouzes, right? And so, but, transitioning then to the next segment, right? One of the like Abbey style beers are generally known for their fermentation type characteristics. And that was sort of the next group that you had is Fungus Kingdom. And the flavor text says, during fermentation, yeast cells eat grain sugars and convert them into alcohol and carbonation, but they also create pronounced aroma and flavor compounds, which range from fruity to funky. These are the hidden beers showcasing the wonders of Belgian yeast. And I think that was where I sort of was trying to explain, well, this is what I would think of as a Belgian beer. And she was just looking at me going, you're so wrong. But that's okay.
Yeah. No, I mean, I totally understand why, but it's because Belgian brewers are very intentional about like fermentation, and there are so many yeast driven beers. So that section is fun. Like, it's kind of I mean, you could write a whole book about Brett beers, right? Of course. Totally. So like one of the beers in the book is Cuvée de Ville, which is from Brouwerij den Hardenberg. That's a kind of a family brewery. The head brewer there is actually a professional pianist. So he studied at the Royal Academy of Music in Brussels. He was going to be a pianist. And, there's a kind of a more poetic narrative in that story about, the comparison between composing music and creating something like lambic, which is like both a mix of the mathematics and science that music has, but also like the kind of feel it in your fingers creativity and and also the fact that he was from a family of brewers, but also a family of musicians, and actually playing music together with people that you care about and members of your family in particular is like something that's actually quite special. And making beer with people that you care about, friends and especially family, is also something that's really special. So he was like pulled from this other career into this career as a brewer, and he's now he's a lambic brewer for Timmermans. He's brewing at Anthony Martin. He works for the Anthony Martin group, so he's doing like the Bourgogne de Flanders like beers up in Bruges. He brews Waterloo beers down in Wallonia. And then he has a side project in Brussels for another lambic producer, and he does his own family brewery, which is making great clean ales, the Brett Ale Cuvée de Ville, and also their own lambic. So, yeah, it's that's a really interesting one about like how those fermentation flavors can really influence everything. La Moneuse, I'm sure a lot of your listeners will know Brasserie de Blogy, but I mean that's a brewery that has to go in the book. They're brewing kind of beers that they sometimes just don't really describe very well, but which are essentially like saisons with a lot of like, peachy apricot citrus character. Really, really wonderful beers. But again, a story which is also a little bit heartbreaking in terms of like the son who was taken over working in that small space, who suffered some serious heart attacks, in his 30s, in his mid 30s. Ardent Saison, again, this is another Walloon beer. Again, it's a Brett conditioned Saison actually, so it's really interesting. And like they actually worked for their clean top fermenting yeast with Rochefort for that beer. I think also with Orval. And then Space Cadet, which is like this wheat beer, which again, I really wanted the opportunity to talk about like Belgian wheat yeast, because there's this kind of transformation of like what Belgian wheat beer was in the 1960s, like sort of Pierre Celis era, to what it was in the 90s when InBev rolled out Hoegaarden as this like massive commercial beer, to what the guys at Verzet, the subject of that story, are trying to do with their beer, which is like basically make this version of historical wheat beer, but not using the spices that were traditionally used, like the obviously the coriander, the bitter orange peel, but also like chamomile, which was, reportedly used back then as well. So like, yeah, I had to go deep on wheat beer for one of the stories, and not leave that out. But there's so many other stuff I had to leave out. So it's like, yeah.
Yeah, I know so many different beer styles that you had to leave out, but and it's an amazing diversity of beers. Again, Belgians, that adaptivity, they're not afraid to use different yeasts, right? Yeasts that are going to do peach esters, or yeasts that are going to be Brett, that are going to have this or that, or that you're going to find locally or wherever. I mean, it's just really, really amazing. And again, another style of beer that I don't necessarily associate with Belgium is what you call serial killers, right? And these are beers that feature malt. So again, beer, you say beer is an agricultural product made with cereals such as barley, wheat, rye, spelt, and oats. These grains don't just give beer its color, structure, and fermentable sugars. They impart flavors that range from biscuits, nuts, and toast to caramel, chocolate, and coffee. These are the hidden beers that will assassinate your cravings. And yeah, I mean, in my mind, that's sort of the main flaw of malt forward beers, is that they're oftentimes sweet. But I didn't taste any overly sweet beers anytime I was in Belgium, and I had several malty examples.
I mean, I would say that like those sweet, as you say, cloying beers do exist in Belgium, absolutely.
Oh, sure. Mm-hmm.
But I do think, again, it probably comes down to like this like obsession with balance in terms of like what the drinker expects. Especially like the conservative drinker, he wants some malt character, but he doesn't want it too sweet. He wants like his yeast character and all. Like he's looking for something in particular. So I think in terms of like malts, Belgians are they are, I would say, fairly restrained. So they definitely will use caramel malts. You're probably aware of like Special B, which is this kind of almost dangerous like toffee characteristic malt, which both like Dingemans and Chateau produce their versions of it, and it's really impactful if used in like very small proportions and in the right way. But like Belgians aren't using like 10 malts in a beer, well, like especially if you go to like the regional family brewers, like they're sometimes when I ask them, like, you've got like one Pilsner malt or pale ale malt, and then, one other like slightly colored specialty malt. And then I'm asking them, is there anything else? And they're like, no, what do you mean? Like, why would we put anything else in, So, they're obviously getting color and sugar from other sources as well, because they're not afraid of using like actual sugar products, like Belgo products. Again, why are they not like cloying? There's a lot of discussion as well about like multi-stout mashing, which is like for a lot of people still the way to do it because of tradition and how they know it, and they do believe that there's like a digestibility or like a saccharification that you sacrifice if you don't do that. However, I'm not so convinced with like how modified malts are today, but it's definitely a cultural thing among Belgian brewers where like a lot of them that I talk to are still doing, a 62 to 64 degrees Celsius and then like a sort of 68 to 72 degree, and then before they mash out at 78. Like, so there's like, and then some of them are still doing like protein rests, at like 58 or whatever it is. So there's like the multi-step mashing at various temperatures is a part of it. And maybe that does have an impact, who knows, on sort of that sort of end fermentability of whatever wort you get out of it. And again, yeah, we talked about balance and that. So like in terms of like why they're not as sweet, I wouldn't say that there are no cloying beers in Belgium. That's just not true.
Sure.
But yeah, but there's
Yeah,
there's a different approach.
They're much drier and they're much sweeter, but I mean, even still, the Belgians are exploring all the different. You mentioned that Belgians are only brewing with a few malts, but they still have an incredible diversity of style. Like I remember reading about the beer that's brewed in the hospital, the winter ale, right? That was amazing to sort of think about, like, oh wow, I didn't realize Belgians were making a winter ale. I'd think of sure, a Belgian quad or something like that as being dark, but again, like Abbey style or that way. I don't think of Belgians as brewing a winter ale and calling it winter ale.
Yeah, I mean, again, explaining winter beers is really difficult, and it's like there are. It's not a style again like Trappist, but it's this kind of it's something which comes with cultural baggage, and there definitely are traits to those types of beers, obviously given the season. But I think what most people are probably thinking of when they think of winter beer that are listening to this right now is like, oh yeah, it's going to be dark. It's going to have some malt complexity. It's going to be high ABV. It's going to be probably spiced. But actually, in Belgium, there's a massive festival in Essen, in the northeast of the country, called the Kerstbier Festival, which is like an actual Christmas beer festival. If any of your listeners ever get a chance to go, it's again a very special event. It's just a festival of Christmas and winter beers, right? But it's just a lovely group of people and it's a real joyful festival. It's so popular now that they had to like ticket it and like months in advance because people were really trying to go. But there's a vote in the last 10 or 12 years now for like the top winter beer every year. And like the beer that has won it the most is not a beer, like a winter beer is not a beer that's dark, spiced and like high in alcohol. It is high in alcohol. It's a beer called Stille Nacht by De Dolle Brouwers, which is like a sort of a strong blonde ale. And it just goes to show you, like, well, if that's the the epitome of what they consider to be a great winter beer, Christmas beer, then how can you say that it's a style? But I mean, there is a winter beer in the book. It's from Vicaris Winter and Dendermonde. And again, that's as much a beer about its sort of malt character as it is about its yeast character,
Yeah, for sure. And again, I mean, we talk about all this range of diversity. We talk about malt beers and hop beers and yeast beers and thirst quenchers and acidic beers and stuff. And then there are beers that just refuse to be categorized, right? And I think
and I had to categorize them, so yeah, I know how difficult it is.
Yeah, exactly, right. You had to categorize them, and so the last category of your book, I think, is a cool one. It's called Unusual Suspects. And here's the text. This is Belgian brewers often meld a respect for tradition with playful experimentation. These are the hidden beers that deploy out of the ordinary ingredients or processes to produce revelatory drinking experiences. And so, yeah, tell us about some Unusual Suspects.
Yeah, so this is the spillover category where the beers I really wanted to include. So
yeah, right.
There's beer from Hoften Dormal, which is like a farmhouse brewery in like an actual. They have a farm. The family is like as, if not more, occupied with farming as it is with brewing. It's in just outside Leuven. The Janssens family, and it's like a hippie commune. When you go there, they're all there. Like there's a bunch of them living in different buildings on the same farm, yeah. And they have a Whitloaf, triple Whitloaf. I think you guys in America might call it a Belgian endive. In the UK, I think it's called chicory.
Okay, yeah.
Basically, it's like something that is like an indigenous vegetable, which is really culturally like embedded in like that part of Belgium, especially around Campanote, where the family originally came from. So they have this kind of this vegetable triple, which is there to obviously it's a very bitter vegetable. And it's like really like dense nutriently, so it's really good for you, and like a lot of families have it. It's very traditional. Yeah, there's another beer from the Haspenhoe, which is like the fruit growing region of Belgium in Limburg, in the province of Limburg, and that is an oaked Calvados barley wine. So, there's like it's mostly apples and pears, but you have some cherries still. But a lot of the cherries now, even the Scadbricks, are coming from other countries, like mostly getting them from Eastern Europe now. But in the Haspenhoe, you have a lot of apple production, and that sort of Calvados comes from a local distillery, Stokerij, as they call it, and that brewery is making like a really interesting beer there. There's a jasmine and green tea pale ale from a very trendy and sort of thoughtful brewery in Brussels called L'Ermitage, who are like a kind of started out as like this group of student creatives who basically were like drinking tea. They did wine sommelier courses, they did beer courses, and then they started a brewery together. So really interesting guys and very, very good beers, and certainly very internationally focused. And then you have like an aperitif beer from De Vliet, which is in Holsbeek. And it's like, I'm not going to say like maybe I do say like, brut would be maybe the easiest way to explain it.
Something like that. Yeah, right. Just high carbonation.
But a lot of brut beers probably, you maybe Malheur, maybe Deus. These beers are like produced with like the champagne process of like dégorgement, remuage, and all that sort of stuff. And this is actually totally different. He was like, I feel that those beers don't taste enough like those aperitif drinks. And he then was like, I'm going to ferment it with a lager yeast, and I'm going to add like elderflower syrup, and I'm going to I'm going to ferment it with lactobacillus. Like, so there's like, and like what comes out is like this thing which is kind of like a champagne, right? So it's that's the thing, is like, it sounds strange that you would approach it like that, but when you actually ask him all the reasons and learn about his backstory as a sort of a brewing engineer who has like 20 years experience working with sugar and different types of sugar, it's like, okay, right now I understand a little bit what you're going for. Yeah. So yeah, that section is kind of fun, and it's like, so I love out of the box.
Yeah, that section is like, it feels to me like a little bit of this, a little bit of that, right? It's like, oh, here's a little bit of this, here's a little bit of that, and it's just sort of describes to me as like a nice way to round out, like, okay, we've kind of categorized these Belgian beers, and then these ones we just can't, right? And so here we go. This is other Belgian beers that people are looking at, that are enjoying, and so that's just a handful of the hidden beers, and of course you couldn't fit all of the beers that you wanted in the book with 24. So the last section, we'll call it, is several pages of about, I don't know, another 60 or 70, breweries that didn't make the cut.
Yeah, there's 60 in there. I think I also like stayed to the kind of same categories, but it gave another 10 or so in each. Again, pulling from things that were happening, in real time in Belgium that I thought should be included, but also from my long list and from, the 10 years of reporting I did since I came here. So I wanted to put as much value in the book as I could, because I could have just gone with the 24, maybe give each an extra couple of pages, which is totally possible because we had amazing photography from Ashley. But it's like, for people buying this should be like an incredible resource to go and like see what's out there, and just to see, on a visit or in your sitting at your coffee table, like what's there. Let me look at these producers. Let me go and do my own research.
Yeah.
So I wanted to just include as much value as possible.
Well, it's just chock full of value, and I think there's like the anticipation of like reading the stories of the people, and understanding what they went through, and then going to Belgium to actually try the beers that they made, but also talk with the people who are in the book. I mean, these are the people that you're going to see when you go to the establishment. These are the people that are brewing the beer and making it, right? It's not like whenever you're going to one of the larger establishments, you're not going to be able to talk to the brewer, or the person that came up with the beer. These are the people, and you're going to see them and you're going to talk to them. That's the amazing thing about them being hidden. And again, you talked about it being a resource. And so this is sort of a wrap-up quote. And then I'll ask you that question that I ask of all my listeners. In the book, you write, the stories in this book are about science, business, identity, war, mythology, art, history, and place. They're about relationships and love. They're about striving in the face of adversity. They're about overcoming personal tragedy. And together, these hidden beers showcase all the reasons that Belgium is the greatest beer nation on earth. It's incredible writing, and it is so apparent in the book. And so now I'm going to ask you that question that I ask all of my listeners whenever I'm close to wrapping up the show. And it's, if you want brewers, I'm actually going to expand that. If you want people to take away just one thing from today's episode or from your book, Hidden Beers of Belgium, what would it be?
I think go to Belgium if you had to distill it. Because, like I wasn't like a beer person or a brewer or like, that wasn't who I was before I came to Belgium. And I feel like you can read so many sort of histories of triple or style descriptors of Saison, and you can drink, bottles that you get, but like until you go into some like random little brown cafe or some local suggests you go to this other weird, place where there's like an old pasture style red brick farm on one side, and then like this awful Flemish industrial, factory on the other, and then there's like an old medieval cobblestone thing that leads you somewhere else where you have another drink, and it's like till you go in there and you like chat people and like see the kind of the understated nature of it and kind of the ugliness of it and the awkwardness of it and the pragmatism of it, that you actually see the beauty and the romance of it, right? So I guess the advice would be like just get in there and like don't have too many preconceptions, don't like take too many notes, just go and like experience it and talk to people, travel, ask people questions, and that's definitely the best way to use the book, but also just to come and enjoy Belgian beer.
Yeah, and I was going to say, bring the book with you, get it beforehand, read the stories of the brewers, and then talk to them. And enjoy that experience. Immerse yourself in the culture. That's what's so cool about the book, and I love it. Well, Breandán, is there anything else that you wish to share that we didn't get to today?
I think we talked about a lot.
Yeah, we covered some ground. Yeah. I mean, it's an amazing book. I mean, we could have spent another 2 days talking about these, each of the stories and all of the people that make Belgian beer. I mean, it was incredible. I want to say another shout out to the photographer. You already mentioned Ashley Joanna, as well yourself, for writing the book. There's also, just so that everybody's aware, a foreword by Rob Todd, who everyone should recognize as the Allagash brewer. So,
Rob's a regular visitor to Belgium, and, I met him very early on in my journey. He was coming to a lot of like special events, like the one in particular, the Nacht van de Grote Dorst, which is the Night of the Great Thirst. It's like a big party for lambic producers, essentially. It was originally in Eizeringen, but Rob's been coming over. He makes like a really wonderful product in Coolship. He has an incredible amount of respect, and he is respected by Belgian producers as well, because he comes here and he listens and he reaches out. And I was like, I really wanted a non-Belgian to write the foreword for the book, because I didn't want it to be insular. I didn't want it to be like inward facing. So I was like, I want Rob to do it. And I asked him, and he, I'm eternally grateful that he said yes. And he wrote a really great foreword about his own journey in beer that was inspired by Belgium, and how hopefully the book will do the same for other people. So I'm really grateful to Rob, and it's so great to have him as the writing the forward.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, Belgium is an amazing beer culture. And as Breandán said, you need to go to Belgium to experience it for yourself. So Breandán, thank you so much for joining me in the Brew Lab.
Thank you, Kate. Great. Loved it.
All right. And of course, listeners, there will be a link to the book Hidden Beers of Belgium, which you can purchase. I highly recommend it, and go on that trip to Belgium. All right. Next week, Jordan and I are going to be back talking about how to brew Belgian style beers. I'm not going to call them Belgian beers anymore. I'm going to say Belgian style. If that is a thing, we'll see. But we'll talk about how to brew those from your home. See y'all then. The Brew Lab is a production of Brewlosophy, where they who drink beer think beer. Don't forget to visit brewlosophy.com to read about our weekly experiments and other brewing adventures, and listen to us talk about it on our other show, the Brewlosophy Podcast. Thanks to all of our sponsors and patrons that help make this show possible. If you'd like to receive a reward for helping us do what we do, visit patreon.com/brewlosophy to see how you can do just that. Thanks so much for listening. We'll be back in the Brew Lab with another guest next week. Until then, think beer.